Good evening, everybody. At least it's evening where we are, almost, although it's bright and sunny out, which is really exciting. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have I hope, a kind of fun program for you. We are taking advantage of our Teach 250 idea of inspiring a more perfect union, and we are going to look at monument makers, and we are super excited to have a guest presenter with me tonight. Erin Kester Tussell from the National Portrait Gallery is with us, and we've been working together on this program. Very excited. I'm Ranger Jen, by the way. I see a lot of familiar names in my chat box there, so I'm very excited to see so many of you joining us tonight. By all means, introduce yourself, say hello, tell us where you're from if you're so inclined in the chat. And we're hoping that you'll be active participants with us and get thinking about our monument makers and share any thoughts you might have as we go through this tonight. As always, I want to just thank the Trust for the National Mall, our partner who helps coordinate these trips, these virtual sessions that we get to do. And they're great about helping us advertise and host our Zooms and promote some of our content. So we're really excited to be able to work with them, and really glad to have Erin with me here tonight from the Portrait Gallery. So would you like to kick it off with a welcome and a question?
Absolutely. So my name is Erin, and I'm an educator at the National Portrait Gallery here in Washington, D.C. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the gallery in a moment, but while we are waiting to make sure everybody has time to join, this is kind of an odd time of day for folks I know. On the screen. So if you are from the DC area, you are probably already familiar with many of the monuments that are included on the National Mall. And we would like to know who you might choose to include in a new monument on the National Mall and why you would choose to include them. So go ahead, introduce yourself in the chat, take a moment to think about the question on your screen, and then feel in the meantime, I see some DC folks in the chat. Somebody from California. You might be our furthest joining participant so far. Somebody from Gettysburg, not far at all. Minnesota, welcome. All right, and Chris, I see that you would add Barack Obama. Tell me why. Oh, RBG, that's a great idea too. Supreme Court Justice. Excellent. Jennifer added Harriet Tubman for all of her work on the Underground Railroad. I like that idea as well. Very good. All right, and Susan added Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Oh, thank you for getting back to that, Chris. Obama, because he's a historical president and a trailblazer. Excellent. Michelle added George W. for leading the country after 9/11. A very significant part of our nation's history for sure. Okay, well, I want you to keep thinking about this question as we move through the program and we take some time to highlight some of the people who have contributed. So Ranger Jen is going to tell us a little bit about the National Mall.
Well, those of you who have joined us before probably don't need to hear too much from me about this, but as just a form of introduction, you know, we are a national park site that covers a long range of history, and we go back, you know, to before all the presidents were here to modern day. And so the idea of memorialization and who should be added is a great question. I think it's a great question you can have posed to students, The Trust for the National Mall posed that question just a couple years ago in their Beyond Granite exhibit, which, if I'm not mistaken, may make an appearance again someday. But whose story is missing is just a really, I feel like, a great question to ask for students to think about. Who's here, but who's also not here. So I could talk a lot about the National Mall and all the things that we represent. When I go out and visit students, I usually make sure we first understand that it's not a place to go shopping, and that it is a place where we commemorate all of the people who have memorials here, the war heroes, the presidents, civil rights leader, but also a place that is, the site of First Amendment demonstrations, and where some of our biggest gatherings happen, where we want our voices to be heard, when we want the people we've elected to represent us, when we want to share our important ideas with them. This is the place that people come. And it's also just a fun park sometimes. We found, especially during the pandemic, people were just coming out here to ride their bikes and have a picnic. And so that's an important part of who we are too. So with that, I will throw it back to Erin to share a little bit more about the portrait gallery. Cool place if you haven't been.
Thanks, Jen. So this is what the exterior of our building looks like on the left side of your screen. It's pretty old, built in the 1830s and 1840s. It was actually intended to house the United States Patent Office, which it did for a while. And then during the Civil War, it was actually a hospital for soldiers, for Union soldiers specifically. And Clara Barton was there, and Walt Whitman was there, and he helped write letters for soldiers who were receiving care in the building. And up on the third floor in the Great Hall, which is actually my virtual background here, Abraham Lincoln had his second inaugural ball. So the building didn't become a museum until the 1960s. On the right side of your screen, you can see the interior of our building, which looks like this. It's our lovely, lovely courtyard, which is a great place to come and have lunch sometime. You can bring food in and sit there. It used to be an outdoor space, but about 15 years ago, they added this glass and steel roof so that we can use it all year round. We really like to begin our programs in the courtyard because it's right in the center of the museum. And behind these walls is where we keep all of our portraits. We have about 25,000 portraits in our collection. And we're still collecting new portraits all the time because our mission, as part of the Smithsonian, every museum has a different mission. Ours is to tell the story of the United States through portraiture. So we collect portraits of people who have made a really big impact on the United States in some way or another. So just really quickly, we'll warm up your fingers a little bit. I'm wondering who you think you might see in the National Portrait Gallery. Who do you think we collect portraits of?
I did, of course, forget to mention that if you prefer to actually speak, we have the ability to unmute you. I think everybody's pretty well muted, but if you are so inclined and would like to, shout out an answer, if you raise a hand, our friends at the Trust will be able to unmute you. If you have a point you'd like to make and not use the chat box, you're more than welcome to raise a hand, and we'll get you unmuted so you can share and chat with us.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. Okay, Michelle, you are right. We have at least one portrait of every single president, starting with George Washington, the very first, all the way to the 46th, who is Joe Biden. We don't actually commission the official portrait until the president is done being in office or just about being done in office. So Biden's is actually in the works right now. Right, Susan, we have portraits of first ladies as well, the Supreme Court, definitely prominent military figures. And yes, Chris, many famous Americans in different walks of life, politicians, cultural icons. We have Michael Jackson, we have Michael Jordan, we have Katy Perry, we have Martin Luther King Jr. We've got lots and lots of different people. Yes, Chris, we do have Beyonce. She's actually hanging in our recent acquisitions exhibition right now, and famous writers. Excellent. Sounds like some of you maybe have actually been to the portrait gallery, which is fantastic. Okay. So at the portrait gallery, we look at the artwork. And we encourage people, especially students, we find using what we call the elements of portrayal to be pretty helpful in this slowing down. So these elements include things like facial expression and hairstyle. I have to spell correctly though. Hairstyle, facial expression, pose, clothing, objects, the background, the medium or material that the artwork is made out of. And even, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll start with these ones, or I'll add color too. These are some of what we call the elements of portrayal. So I know that Dolly Madison's name is already on the screen, so we already know who this sitter is or this person is. But what I'm going to invite you to do is just put away any of the existing knowledge that you already have of Dolly Madison and pretend this is the first time you've ever seen this portrait. Like maybe it would be for some of your students. Maybe they wouldn't recognize who Dolly Madison is. And what I want you to do is choose 1 or 2 of these elements on the screen. Okay. And in the chat, I just want you to write something about that element, how you would describe it, right? Or what it makes you think, or how you think she might be feeling, or what emotion it brings up for you. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Look really closely at this portrait, choose one of those elements, and then add a little free write in the chat about that element. It can be 2 words, it can be 2 sentences, whatever works for you. And then when you're ready, oh, look, some people are already adding to our chat. Excellent. Feel free to add some more. Great. It looks like we got a few different focuses here, a couple different elements going. She almost looks like she's smirking. I agree, Terry. She's not quite smiling, is she? But she's not really frowning at us either. The background is dark. Why did she always pose with a hat? This turban, right? You hardly can see a portrait of Dolly Madison, especially in her later years, where she is without this turban. Let's see, what else did we notice? Susan said that she looks serious. She's very covered up. I agree with that. Thank you, Chris. Like her clothing is really high up on her neck, right? Now, if one of my students that I was working with noticed her clothing and they said it's very high up, she's very much covered, my next question for them might be, how do you think that would feel to try on this outfit? Would you like to wear this outfit? So I'm going to invite you to answer that in the chat. How do you think this outfit would feel? Comfortable, uncomfortable? I don't know that I would like to wear this. It looks a little bit heavy. Yeah, Michelle, I agree. Too hot in the middle of a DC summer. Depends on the climate. Might be okay. Some of us don't like to have things up on our neck like that. Yeah, I agree. Jennifer, I like that you noticed that she's on her own, right? We don't really see any objects or any pets or family or anything like that in the background, do we? So why do you think the artist would do that? What's the point of that? Why didn't he add anything else to this portrait? He could have put her in the White House, right? He could have put her at one of her many famous parties that she was known for throwing, a fancy dinner even. I like that idea. Focus on her, and she is kind of timeless. I like that. That's a very good way to describe her. We just make the individual the focus, or maybe it's one of a set. That's an interesting idea too. Like maybe there are several portraits that were meant to actually be together. Very good. Okay, so the next thing that I want you to do, we're actually going to do a routine that's called Step Inside. So I'm going to build on these elements a little bit now that we've started talking about these things. And I'm going to invite you to think about what Dolly Madison might be thinking about in this portrait. What do you think she is feeling, or what is she thinking about here? And this, if you want to think about some of your prior knowledge of Dolly Madison, you can do that too. What might she be thinking about? Take the picture already. Thanks, Jen. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, maybe she's a little impatient with that little smirk. Susan and Chris are thinking about her role as a first lady, right? And maybe she's thinking about all of her responsibilities that she had, pride for what she accomplished as the first lady, and even afterwards. Excellent. Okay, I like those ideas. She was a very interesting person, a very interesting lady, right? She was obviously married to President James Madison. Dolly Madison, her father converted to Quakerism when she was a teenager. They had formerly owned enslaved people, and he freed all of the people that he had enslaved when he converted to Quakerism, and their family life really greatly changed. And then she married a man, had a couple of children with him, and then one of her children and her husband died of yellow fever. And she eventually met James Madison. She was actually introduced to James Madison by Aaron Burr, of all people. And then she married James Madison, and she left her Quaker faith at that point. She was with James Madison when he was serving as Secretary of State for Jefferson, and she actually started doing her first lady duties during that time because Jefferson was widowed and he needed some help with that. So she had kind of stepped into that role during that time. Eventually, Madison passed away, and Dolly Madison kept up a lot of these kind of social affairs and things like this and continued working in the DC area. Terry, I like that. She's thinking, if I could only afford real jewels instead of these paste jewels. Yes. Towards the end of her life, she did not have very much money for a number of reasons. Her son had some financial issues, and she and her husband had helped him out for sure. So by the end of her life, she did not have the financial means that she had begun with, definitely. Chris is asking, was Dolly her full name? As far as I know, it was. Right, Jen?
We're doing
It
a
was
quick check
Dolly.
on that. Yeah, we think so. I don't
Yeah,
remember her being called anything else.
yeah,
So,
I believe so. Okay. So what I want to do now, I want to thank you all for all of your comments and things like that. But Jen is going to tell us how she is related to the National Mall.
well, very interestingly enough, when we started with this, we thought one thing and then we discovered something else. So our connection to the idea of these monument makers was that Dolly would have been a prominent name in Washington, D.C. around the time that they would have been talking about building a monument to George Washington. And so one of the stories that we had kind of thought to be the case was that Dolly was there on the day of the cornerstone laying, which was July 4th, 1848. And Dolly had been a supporter of this project. This required fundraising, and she and Alexander Hamilton's widow, Eliza Hamilton, and John Quincy Adams' wife, Louisa Catherine Adams, had all been pretty prominent in the city as far as trying to help fundraise. And so for a long time, until probably about this week, we really thought that Dolly had been at the monument groundbreaking or cornerstone laying. And so we got all into the life and times of Dolly Madison papers that we could find. And so here on the top line is the June 22nd response, where she's like, I really want to be there because, you know, I feel the highest gratification. And my husband's opinion, again, is that a monument worthy the memory of Washington should be made, and that she's, you know, thrilled to be there. But then we found this July 3rd, 1848 response, in which she's very sorry to recede from my engagement, that of meeting you at the laying of the cornerstone. And the people that she's writing to are the Washington National Monument Society, which is a group that we still work with today. Every year for Washington's birthday, we do a program at the Washington Monument in honor of George's birthday, and members of the Washington Monument National Society still show up. So it's really exciting. They're modern day people, not people from back then, but yeah, it's pretty exciting. So all this time, we pretty much thought Dolly had been there, and it turns out that as she said, I feel it will be impossible for me to encounter the day with safety unless indeed I remain in the president's house, which begs a lot of questions. Like 1848, she wasn't in the president's house, so why she wrote that. But from whence an invalid like myself could be gratified by the sight of such an immense audience, will you then have the kindness to make my apology to the committee of arrangements? So we assume then that she did not attend the groundbreaking or the cornerstone laying. We also have gotten quite a chuckle when you mentioned her full name, that she signs everything DP, kind of like the DP Madison, which is kind of a fun sign off that she must have used when she was signing letters like that. So thankful to this program. We did a little more research. We found out something we weren't really quite sure of, but we decided ultimately to keep Dolly in this monument makers category because of the work she did in supporting the building of this monument. And if we could flip to the next slide, we do have a image that comes from that of not from that event, but from that time period, or an image of the cornerstone laying that came from Library of Congress, it looks like. And then a picture of Elizabeth Hamilton and her response in regards to attending. And she said the same, along the same lines, you know, I can't imagine leaving DC. Since I was invited to this event, I feel like, you know, the ceremony in which I'm invited to participate calls back recollections. I love the way these people write. So deeply interesting to me from my early and intimate association with the illustrious man to whom this tribute of a nation's gratitude is so justly due. So she can't leave town without being there. So we know she was there. Yeah, she's not a first lady, but we see that from the early stages of monument building in the city, we had women involved in the process and having a role there. And so we thought this was a connection worth calling attention to.
And I should have really mentioned the Dolly story about the Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington in the fire of 1812, right?
It's a good one.
So just in keeping with Dolly's support of memorializing George Washington, she
Right.
During the War of 1812, when they were coming to burn the White House, she supposedly ordered that this amazing portrait of Gilbert Stuart that we actually have the original of in the National Portrait Gallery. She ordered it be taken down and saved and sent off to New York, where it could be protected. So it's actually, their version is back in the White House, and then ours is at the Portrait Gallery. So you can see it in either of those places.
And there's a wonderful connection, you know, our whole Teach 250 series has been trying to incorporate, the voices of the people that you don't often hear about. The person who helped take that portrait down was her, I guess at that point, still enslaved person, Paul Jennings, and he wrote us a history of his experiences working for the Madisons. And then, gosh, I just read this recently that after James died, I think, is it Daniel Webster? Somebody purchases Paul Jennings and then frees him. And it's just, if you're looking for another a way of telling the story of Washington, D.C. during this time period, and the idea of an enslaved person working in the White House, it's really, really fascinating history. So look for Paul Jennings if you're looking for other stories to tell.
Yeah, Susan. Susan says she's pretty sure it was Daniel Webster, and that sounds right to me as well. Okay, so we are going to move forward a little bit in history, and we're going to take a look at this portrait. So for this one, we're going to do something called looking 10 times 2. So I want you to think about all those elements again. Think about hairstyle and pose and objects and the background and the medium and all that good stuff. And I'm going to invite you to, in the chat, write 10 words that come to mind when you see this portrait. So it can be colored, it could be just anything that comes to mind, 10 words. Write them into the chat, and then in about 30 seconds or so, I'll say hit send, and we'll just have a waterfall of words come into the chat. If you don't get to 10, don't sweat it. Just put as many as you can. Okay, so take about 30 seconds. All right, and some people are already starting to add their responses. If you have not added yet, feel free to hit send. I like these. Okay, excellent. Reflective. Pam, I am wondering if you would mind telling us if you meant reflective, like the material is reflective, or reflective like the person in the portrait seems reflective. And while you do that, okay, the person. I could have gone either way. So just looking for clarity. It looks etched, bronze. I like that. Jennifer added serious, yellow. Yes, Daniel Chester French, chair, thinking, tired. Good. The Lincoln Memorial like pose, very interesting. Very good. Image, top border, peaceful. These are all great words. Okay, so this exercise is called looking 10 times 2. Background, hand thinking. Thank you, Pam. So I'm going to give you a little bit more information here, and then I'm going to have you come up with 10 new words to add to the chat. So this is Daniel Chester French, as it says very clearly on the bottom of the portrait itself, and then also on the text label over here too. Daniel Chester French was a very important sculptor responsible for Lincoln in the Lincoln Memorial on the National Mall. But the person who made this portrait of Daniel Chester French is also very important, and she's actually the one that I want to highlight. But we don't have a portrait of her in the National Portrait Gallery. Why do you think we don't have a portrait of her? Any guesses? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Her name is Evelyn Beatrice Longman, by the way. Why would we not have a portrait of her in our 25,000 portrait collection? Yeah, Susan's probably somewhat obscured in her contribution. And yeah, exactly. If anybody else wants to add, feel free to do that. She's shy, maybe, and because she's a woman. Yeah, right? Good answers. Okay, so Evelyn Beatrice Longman, she was born in Ohio in 1874. And she worked really hard. She moved to Chicago when she was 19. She wanted to study sculpture. She went to the 1893 Columbia Exposition. Eventually, she moved to New York in 1901 to be a studio assistant to this man that you see on the screen, Daniel Chester French. She went to DC and actually assisted him in making the Lincoln Memorial. She was the first, oh, good question, Susan. I'm going to let Jen answer that for you in a little bit, but you are thinking along the right lines. She was the first female sculptor to be a full member of the National Academy of Design, and was also made a full member of the Pennsylvania Academy of the Arts. She worked for about 30 years on a lot of commissions after helping with all of these things, including this portrait here, which is now in the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. She very often signed her work with her maiden name, Evelyn B. Longman, but then sometimes would also use her married name, which was Evelyn Longman Batchelder. So now that you have a little bit more background information about the artist who made this portrait, I'm going to invite you to come up with 10 new words. So they can't be the words you already used in this portrait, but I want you to come up with 10 new words that you think of when you see this portrait. And I'll give you a few moments. Go ahead and start adding those to the chat when you're ready. This is kind of a challenge sometimes for students. And what I've done before is with younger kids, I'll make it like 5 words and 5 words instead of 10 and 10. But it's fun to see what they come up with. Does having that bio change the way you see this portrait? Do you notice anything new or different? Okay, so some sort of Egyptian figures perhaps in the back from the memorial. Yes, and if you look closely, you can see Lincoln right here, right? This work that she assisted Daniel Chester French with. Very good. Sculpture of a sculptor. I like it. Pride, prominent, historical, emotions, relaxed, leaves. I like all of those things. I was wondering if somebody was going to notice this tool in his hand too. He's got a tool of a sculptor in his hand there as well. I did want to mention, often I will ask students why they think he's thinking here. In this pose, you know, he's like looking off into the distance. Often artists will tell us that somebody is a thinker by having them kind of gaze off into the future in the distance. Or the other trick, they might pose them like this, or like this, or like this, or like this, even just to be really specific to tell us that that person has a good brain in their head. Excellent. Okay, Pam, thank you for adding to proper chair, president, suit, name, and history. Very good. All right. I think that Jen is probably ready to tell you a little bit more about her contributions to the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, this has become one of my new favorite stories, and super excited that we found these images. I guess that's not the best shot of her on the right, but I thought it was really cool to be able to see her in her element and working at the Lincoln Memorial. So if you've ever heard of the Loomis Chaffee School, it's in Windsor, Connecticut. She, as you heard, married Nathaniel Batchelder, and he was the headmaster of this school. And so today, the archives at this school, private school, has a lot of her stuff, and there's a whole website that has images like this. I mean, we love that picture on the right, on the left, where she's sitting on a piece of the column, and just really cool stuff. We get to put a face to her, right? Because as you said, there's not a portrait of her, but there are some images, and these are apparently from her personal collection. and was left at this, at the archives at the school. And one of the things that they have on this webpage from the school is that she rarely gave interviews, but yet in April of 1921, she sat down with the Hartford Courant, the paper in Connecticut, and seemed really excited about this project that she was working on. She said only one project, a monument still under construction. There's one piece of work of which I can frankly say that I am proud, and that is the interior of the Lincoln Memorial. I did a part of that work. And so we get to see her in action. She had, as you heard, really wanted to be a sculptor. And she had met Daniel Chester French's brother, who wrote a letter on her behalf so that she could go meet Daniel Chester French and be like, hey, I want to go work with you. And that's how they started this friendship. And we've kind of talked about how an interesting relationship it must have been. When she marries Batchelder, she gets married at Daniel Chester French's house, Chesterwood. I don't know if anybody's ever had the chance to go up to Western Massachusetts, but I went a while ago before I knew anything about her, really. And just, now I want to go back and see this. There's a wedding picture, and French hosted the wedding, and French's daughter was the maid of honor. And I mean, there's like all these interesting family connections. But yes, she definitely played a role. There are a lot of photos of her traipsing around with the construction site with Daniel Chester French and Henry Bacon, who's responsible for building the building. So they were friends as well. And I always kind of thought of her in my mind, I guess, as being sort of a young woman. She's 48 years old when when the Lincoln Memorial opens. So I guess she's, in her late 30s, early 40s when they're working on this. And it's just kind of interesting that, that Daniel Chester French gives her the opportunity to work on this project. Imagine in the early 1900s, a woman working on a project like this. And so if you are super interested in this, Google up the Loomis Chaffee archives, and there's a whole page about Evelyn Longman's work on the Lincoln Memorial. Just because I think this is really fascinating too. She ends up marrying Batchelder because he hires her to do a piece of artwork in memory of his first wife. And then that's how they end up getting together. So I think that's kind of a fun story too. But look at this. She must have been a character. She must have been really fun, like just the way she's sitting on that column and everything. So there's a lot more photos, and I originally am from Connecticut, so I have a plan to get up there and poke around this archives a little bit, because I think there've got to be some really interesting photos, more photos that they don't have on their webpage. So I'm hoping to get a chance to do that one of these days. So the next, oh, wonderful, Bristol. Huh. Nice. That is a picture of her work, finished work on the left. And when we talk about artists and their signature, this became a thing just a couple years ago. I don't think many of us knew. But if you were to zoom in on the space, I would say above the pine cone, I'm pointing like you all can see, but above that pine cone, between the pine cone and the kind of design, the decorative design, you would see what's on the right-hand side, and that is her initials that she hid way up there in that wreath. And so it's under the second inaugural. If you're familiar with the Lincoln, you go up the steps to the right, and second wreath in from the far right is where you will find EBL for Evelyn Beatrice Longman. And it's just been a really interesting story to learn about her, considering, I love the question about why we don't have a portrait of her. And I think it's really cool that we can, share her story and encourage, young girls that there's a path out there for you if you're interested in the arts, and not to back down, go for what you want to go for, because she made it happen for herself at a time when it must have been really challenging. So I think she's a really inspirational story, and yeah, I hope we can learn some more about her.
Okay, we have one more monument maker to take a look at with you. And you might be familiar with this person too, Maya Lin. So for this one, we're going to use a looking strategy. Yes, Susan, I agree. I love that she gave herself credit. That's excellent. Okay, thank you for joining us, Pam. All right, so for Maya Lin here, we're going to use a strategy called headlines. So what I would like for you to do is to imagine that you saw this portrait in a newspaper, a magazine, an internet news site, somewhere. What would the headline attached to this portrait be? You can come up with your own headline. Think about those elements, pose, clothing, facial expression, color, medium. We don't have much to go on for background here for this one or objects. So you have to really rely on observing our sitter. And then go ahead and add a headline for this portrait in the chat. I am assuming, but please correct me if I'm wrong, that you're thinking about her pose here. Something I really like to do with students is invite them to pose like the person in the portrait, just to see how it feels. Carol, you're also looking at her pose here for inspiration, standing firm. I like that as well. And if there's anything that we know about Maya Lin, it is certainly that she is someone who stood firm in the face of adversity and objection. Excellent. Okay, so Maya Lin, we recently had a One Life exhibition, so it was just all about Maya Lin and her life, and this is featured in that exhibition. I'm going to show you another image of this. Let me pull it up in our learning lab. I like this one a lot because we can look at it from different angles. Jen, will you just give me a thumbs up if the new image came up? No?
It looks like the same one to me.
Okay. Do you see it from a different angle now?
Oh, different angle now, yes.
Okay, good.
She's off to the side,
Yep,
yes.
okay.
Look facing the other way.
So, oh, thank you for adding that title, Fearless Girl 2.0, Jennifer, that's great. This is a 3D printed sculpture, and it is maybe 12 inches tall. So it's very tiny and it's 3D printed. So it's really fun. We can have students walk all the way around it and see it from all different sides. So you can see a couple of different images here. And if you look really closely, when it's in person, you can actually see like the layers from it being 3D printed. I like that you all were looking at her pose for inspiration for her title, because Maya Lin, she was the architect behind the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And when she came up with this design, she was still in college. She was very young. She hadn't even finished her degree yet in architecture, and people, when they found out that she was the person who was going to design this memorial, people were outraged. It was a blind contest, so her submissions went up against very well established architects. So people were upset about her age. Can you think of any other reasons that people were upset that Maya Lin was chosen to design the Vietnam Veterans Memorial? They're not good reasons. What do you think? Yes, Erica, definitely her ethnicity. Maya Lin is American, but she is the daughter of Chinese immigrants. People felt that wasn't appropriate. And yes, Jennifer, she was a woman, and that also wasn't okay for some reason. Again, she was up against more established older men, many of whom were white. So her gender, her ethnicity, and her age. So this is a photo of the memorial. And these are actually images that she had sent in for this blind contest that she ended up winning. So Maya Lin, when she submitted and she was chosen and people found out and they were very upset that she was the one who was chosen for this, she ended up having to testify in front of Congress and justify her idea. And people were really upset that the names were not listed alphabetically. Does anybody know how the names are listed, though? The names included on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial? I have a feeling that we have some history buffs in our group. Yes, Michelle, you're exactly right. They're listed in order of death. You're exactly right. And the memorial is very reflective. It's very dark. So critics also described it as a dark gash in the earth, and they didn't like that either. They felt that the memorial should probably show soldiers and have statues of soldiers and things like that. But she said that she likes to think of her work as creating a private conversation with each person, and having that reflective finish to the memorial allows visitors to actually see themselves in the work and see themselves on the names of the people who sacrificed and gave their lives in this war. So she felt it was very, very fitting. Of course, when the memorial was opened, when it was unveiled, many people attended and many people were very, very moved by this memorial. I'm wondering, looking at this portrait of Maya Lin, if you can make any connections between her choices in the design of the memorial and the choices that the artist made in this portrait, like how she is portraying Maya Lin. What connections can you make? Yeah, the dark colors, right? Absolutely. It's kind of grayscale, kind of dark, standing strong in the face of adversity. It's very simple, right? Maybe more simple than people would initially expect. Excellent. Okay. Thoughtful. She wasn't designing it for glory, but to make people confront the effect of war. I like that too. So in the title, you maybe noticed that it's Maya Lin 1:5. What is 1:5? It's a ratio. It's 1:5. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I just needed to wait another second. Yeah, it's a ratio. So it's 1/5 of the actual size, right? And Chris, I like the idea that it's 1 of 5 statues. It's not. It's 1/5, like a ratio of size. She says that she sees herself as a very small part of a global environment. Yeah, Jen, that's math. We like to include, I really enjoy including this portrait in our STEAM programming where we talk about math too. So it's very versatile. Okay, Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit about the memorial itself?
Well, I don't know. I thought you covered it pretty well. Yeah, this is Jan Scruggs, the veteran who came back from Vietnam and was, pretty appalled at the way he was treated, and thought there needed to be something to help heal the country from, the conflict of Vietnam, the dividedness of the nation about, not being all on the same page. We contrast the World War II. Oh, I had no idea. Today is Jan Scruggs' birthday. How about that? Who knew? Thank you, Erin. So yeah, this is this is was done to, kind of heal the nation. And we contrasted with World War II, where the country was so united and everyone was common cause and everybody's working together. And, here at the site of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, you are, probably in the footsteps of where protests against this war happened. And so the process of creating this memorial was to help heal the nation. And I think you touched on the different things. It was, 4 criteria that were included. It was, to fit harmoniously with the surroundings. I think the picture showing the evening, how it points towards the Washington Monument. That's the east wall heading out that way. And the west wall, points towards the Lincoln. So it had to fit with the surroundings. It had to be reflective, which is, the black granite. And the choice that she made, yes, was very controversial, because up until that point, all our memorials had been, made out of white stone. And so the idea of using black granite was pretty radical. Had to include all the names, and wow, to think of the names not in the order that they're in is hard to imagine. I've had so many conversations with people who are there. I had a mom tell me years and years ago she felt closer to her son at the wall than she did at his grave, because on the wall he was surrounded by all of his buddies, because they had all been, involved in the same incident, and so they had all died on the same day, and she felt closer to him that he was surrounded by his friends' names on this wall. And so that's 3. Where's my 4th? Oh, not be political about the war, of course, because that was what the whole reason for building this was. So she nailed these criteria pretty well. And, by doing that, she had to really defend her design. I'm pretty sure it was unanimously chosen from the 1,400 plus options that were out there. And then once it was, interesting how you described it, that, once they saw her and they saw the description and all of that, or saw her and her maybe lack of having a whole, lot of credits to her name, maybe that impacted their decision. And, the criticism was that it didn't really show a human face to the conflict. So the compromise to getting it built on the National Mall. And remember that before this time, most of your war memorials are going to be very local. So it would have been, a doughboy statue on a town green, or a Civil War statue downtown. They were all done very locally. And this was a big deal to make it on a national stage. So that compromise will eventually happen with the addition of the 3 servicemen statue, the statue of the soldiers facing the wall. And then we'll get another addition too. But another controversy here was even including a flagpole. That was not part of Mylan's original design, and it eventually will get added near the 3 servicemen statue. I'm always struck by something I read that she said once about the fact, when she does this design, she's a college student. She did this as a school project, and then her friends convinced her it was really good, she should submit it. But that she said at the age she designed this, she had never had anyone close to her die before. And that is amazing, that here she is, the person who's able to help heal all these people who have suffered the effects of this war. And so many people are brought together and come here to mourn and remember their loved ones. And yet, she was able to do this at such a young age. It's pretty impressive. One of the stories that we like to tell, particularly to students, and again, I probably need to go check my sources on this one, but it sure makes for a good story, is that she did this as a school project and supposedly got a B on her project. And to think that she won this contest for a national memorial and has this, historic design on the National Mall, and then didn't get an A for it, is kind of shocking. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I will, qualify my comments here. I thought I heard once that her professor also submitted an entry, and that might have been the reason why she got the grade she got. So anyway, who knows for sure if that's true. I'll get back to you if I've totally butchered that story. But there you go. Thank you, Mark. I guess while we're talking about monument makers and stories about women, we thought we would include this, which is like the newest component of this memorial. And I think this took a little bit of flack, because I think some of the soldiers who fought in Vietnam weren't so sure this needed to be an addition, but there were thousands and thousands of women who went and served in Vietnam as nurses. Right now, I think there's a novel that's been out called The Women, which is about the women who served as nurses in Vietnam, which has become pretty popular on in the historical fiction ranks. And I think it was based, I think the author read the book written by Diane Carlson Evans, who is the nurse behind getting this memorial created. And so this was opened, dedicated in 1993, and this sits kind of in a circle. You walk by the wall, you walk by the flagpole and the three servicemen, you walk down to the wall, and then you walk past the Vietnam Women's Memorial, and it makes kind of the complete story. And yeah, so we're working with a school group that is considering how women's contributions could be enhanced, and their teachers had done a great job preparing them for a visit to them all, and they went around this statue and just stared and stared and stared. I'd never seen anything like it. And they were so fascinated about looking at all the details. And so yeah, memorials and artwork are a great way to engage students in the stories that they tell, and looking closely at them. I mean, we ask students when we walk by, what are these women doing? Who are they looking for? What are they working on? Or, what's kind of what's going on here, and why do you think they chose that? And so yeah, there are a lot of great stories that can be told here. And yes, Susan, it's nice to see the women getting the recognition on the mall. So I believe that could lead us to another thought you had about this, huh?
That was an excellent segue. So our final question, we have just a couple of minutes left with you all, but our final question for you to consider is, how have women used the National Mall to raise awareness about issues they care about? So if you have a second and you want to write something in the chat, feel free to add your thoughts to the chat. If this is something that you want to think about and take with you and maybe discuss in your classroom later with other teachers, that's just fine too. We do want to share some resources with you all as well. So I'm going to take us to our next slide.
Yeah, that's a picture of me out in the park, right past the Vietnam Women's Memorial and the wall. And those are the students who are preparing to host us this Friday night when they show off the work that they've been doing about memorials, particularly to women. And so we're very excited for that. The links I have here, I don't know if they're actual links or if you can copy them or not, but it's the education page for the National Mall. That's the page that we've provided some resources for, and we're always working to add to it. And then if you wanted the general National Park Service web page, is the nps.gov/learn, I think is the link. And you can do like a search of, you're teaching Washington, you could put in George Washington and you'll get parks and lessons from all over the place. So there you go. I'll go to you because yeah.
Perfect.
Your chance.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a couple of people who added responses to the chat. So they were thinking about protesting, like how women use the National Mall. Art too. I like that. Thank you for adding that, Jennifer. Women have for a long time been connected to art, and they might be aware that being able to create these visible memorials, it was a way to create something lasting in a world where they had few opportunities to do something permanent. Very, very well said. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. And on the screen right now, you can see some of our MPG resources. So the Learning Lab, where I pulled up the additional images of Maya Lin with the extra photographs in there of her sketches and things like that. We have all sorts of things in the Learning Lab. We have prepackaged lessons about different historical figures and contemporary figures organized by different topics. So you're welcome to take a look through there. We have more teacher workshops, and we have field trips that are free. So you can either bring your class to us in the museum. We also do virtual field trips. So we can come to you via Zoom or whatever platform you like. And then on this teacher website, you can also find a link to our National Portrait Gallery Summer Teacher Institute. So please take a look. And I think, let's see, Susan added one more, starting with women advocating for the National Monument. For the Washington Monument, the MLK Memorial women have been advocating for a long time. You're exactly right. Okay, excellent. All right, well, here is my email address and Ranger Jen's email address. If you have any more questions for us, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for joining us. It was nice chatting with you, and we appreciated all of your thoughtful contributions.
Erin, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was great to think about art and some of these monument makers in a different way. We do have a student program coming up on Friday. We're going to continue this theme of Women's History Month and doing some women's history trivia related to the National Mall. If you want to bring your students out for a little trivia, we're going to play on Friday afternoon, 1 o'clock Eastern time, if you are so inclined. And I just want to again thank the Trust for hosting us again, and all of you for a great conversation, for engaging with us in the chat, and such great comments. So thank you all very much. Erin, I hope you'll come back and chat with us again sometime. And this was really fun. I hope you all had a good time, and thank you all very much for coming.